I got it. Yeah.
Why three? Why three? It's your choice. So Lionel is here because, like Wallace Stevens, he is the two languages. He's completely the two languages, French and English. And so if in the case of oral discussion, which is a possibility, Lionel can explain me the point if it is obscure for some reasons of audition and of understanding. So we discuss today not the questions of today. The question of today will be discussed tomorrow, but the question of yesterday. And so I propose a classification of the questions. Some questions on anthropological nature of philosophy, question concerning dialectical nature of philosophy and dialectics more generally, and questions, specific questions concerning the concept of immanent exception. Okay? So Lionel will read the question. The first question on anthropological nature of philosophy is a question of Cecilia de Berthe, and
I'll read it now. It's a little long, so bear with us. If indigenous societies are incapable of philosophical investigations within their own traditions and in their own languages, how can they participate as individuals as well as societies in the production of the future without abandoning their cultures and becoming westernized? Is philosophy necessary or desirable in this case? Is it possible that Western philosophy lags behind indigenous traditions regarding the interrelatedness of living beings and natural phenomena?
Thank you for this question, which is in some sense a central question today, which is a question of relationship between dominant societies and poor societies, or weak societies in the contemporary world. I want to explain the point. The question of universality is not first the question of philosophy. The question of universality is the question of existence of truth in my language. But finally, the question of existence of a creation which is really of universal value. That sort of creation is not primitively in the field of philosophy. It's artistic creation, it's scientific creation, it's human creation in general, creation concerning the signification of the life, and so on, political creation, and so on. So we must affirm that the possibility of that sort of creation exists in all societies. So we are not at all saying that the possibility of universal truth is a possibility inside the Western world, not at all. Philosophy is something particular, which is fact is not universal in Western world itself, which is a localized creation. Philosophy is what we can speak a thought, a form of thought in second time, because for the existence of philosophy, we have the necessity of the existence of some truths. Artistic creation, for example, or mathematics, or law, or poetry, or and so on, exist before philosophy, and independently of philosophy. It is a case where, for some circumstances, philosophy does not exist. It's also the case where philosophy exists. Philosophy comes after the real process of creation of truth. And I have given some examples of truths which certainly are creation of societies which are not inside the Western world, like African sculpture, possible vision of nature, and so on. So the question is that it's an obligation for philosophy to take in account all creations, not at all only creations in the Western world, but more generally, all creation, the value of which can be universal. So all creation which can be understood and can come back to life, if you want, in any country, in another world. And so, it's the first point. The second point is that philosophy maybe is a localized creation, like all intellectual creation, but it's addressed to everybody. So, where philosophy does not exist, the task of the philosopher is first to understand that in that sort of societies without philosophy, truths exist, original creation exists, and to take into account all that in the field of philosophy, and secondly, to explain why philosophy exists in all cultural contexts, and why philosophy exists like this. And after that, in the culture, determined culture, the possibility of the new becoming of philosophy, in contact of new truths, is possible. So, there is no contradiction between the existence, the localized existence of philosophy and the existence of some society, some culture, which are not historically enclosed inside the Western world, not at all. The contradiction would be if philosophy was the affirmation that only correct truths are in Western world. This would be, in fact, an imperialist decision. But on the contrary, today specifically, philosophy must affirm with strength the existence of creativity concerning universal truths, not at all linked to the Western world. But there is evidence of the contrary. There are many things which exist outside the Western world and which are of universal value. And the task of philosophy, and in fact of the political part also of philosophy, is to fight against the idea that the Western world is a good world. And it's not because philosophy is a creation of the Western world that the Western world is a good world. In fact, by the creation of philosophy, the Western world has created something which, for a large part, has been the place for a complete critique of the Western world itself. It's a great tradition of philosophy to be a strong critique of its proper world, to participate with some other people, with some other creation, in the context of some other culture, to the fight against the monopolization of the human destiny by the Western world. So the question was absolutely a true question. It is why it's so important, in my conviction, to say that philosophy is under conditions. It's not, there is no pure autonomy in philosophy. It's under condition of existence of truths. And so if existence of truths is not by necessity inside the world, but exists in all forms of the world, that is, the consequence is that philosophy is under the condition of the existence of multiplicity of culture, and not of one. And so we must internationalize the philosophy, not by the imperialist decision everybody must be a philosopher, but on the contrary, by incorporation to the becoming of philosophy of the culture of other countries and the universal creation inside this other culture. If there is an... We continue? Alors, there is an anonymous question, an anonymous letter. Something know this form of writing? No. So, an anonymous question.
You spoke yesterday about the effect of demonstrative mathematics on philosophy, in Greece. Do you believe that quantum physics has had or will have an effect on contemporary philosophy? Has it influenced your thinking in any way?
It's an example of the question of the conditions for philosophy. The state of the development of science is always a strong condition for development of philosophy. We perfectly know, for example, that the beginning of philosophy would be impossible without the birth of mathematics, of demonstrative mathematics in Greece. And so it's a good question to say if a sort of revolution in the field of physics, like the creation of quantum mechanics, has effects in the field of philosophy. My answer, naturally, is yes. Yes. You know, so the most important point is that by the mediation of quantum mechanics, we have the irruption of probabilities in the vision of the natural world. And so the question of a non-completely deterministic vision of physics. During the first part of the last century, there has been two revolutions in the field of physics, big revolutions. First, the relativity, and second, the quantum mechanics. You know that the problem is that these two revolutions are not absolutely, the unity of the two is very difficult. Very difficult. It is a great problem of physics today. But there is, in fact, relativity has changed the philosophical conception of time. Certainly. After the purely linear conception of time in Newtonian physics, we have a conception of time which is in relationship, close relationship with space. Space and time are in some sense the true framework from the description of nature. And so we are a universe with 4 dimensions, not only 3 dimensions of the space, and after that something else which is time. And in the same direction, quantum mechanics has influenced philosophy on the question of relationship between determination and chance, determination and hazardous phenomena. And in my conception of an event, there is something like that. Because when in classical metaphysics, truth is always in close relationship with determination, with necessity. Truth is generally understood as an effect of necessity. The only exception is sometimes the effect of grace, God. But in the field of sciences properly, truth is associated to deterministic vision of nature. With quantum mechanics, we have something different, and probably my vision of the inclusion of an event inside the definition of the truth is, like quantum mechanics, the introduction of a part, non-determinate part in the concept of a truth. My master, Althusser, have also written some texts concerning what he was naming an aleatory materialism, and a materialism with some effect of chance. So, my answer to the question is once more, yes, the existence of quantum mechanics as effect by philosophy in particular. I think it is possible today to maintain that the fundamental and unique relation in nature is the relation between cause and effect. If you read Spinoza or Descartes, for them it's evident. The relationship in nature is all in the form of relationship between cause and effect. And it's a deterministic vision of nature as a system of necessities. I think that under the condition of modern science, it's impossible to maintain one point of view. Because practically we have to understand that in nature itself, not only in human nature, but in nature itself, there is a part of undetermination. Okay, continue. It was these two questions were questions concerning the context of philosophy, anthropological nature of philosophy. Other question concerning the dialectical nature of philosophy, and a question, technical question and historical and philosophical question of Jack Reader.
It's Jake, I think. Jake.
Jake.
Hegel distinguishes the particular from the singular as the presentation or description of an object or subject, and the object or subject in itself. The singular, in its uniqueness, has a universal quality. Does your relation between the particular and the universal ignore this third term, singularity? If so, why?
It would be very ignorance. Naturally, if we have to think something which is, in some sense, in a particular context, and in another sense, universal. Certainly, we must say, like Hegel, that there is a singularity of that sort of thing, that the thing is singular. Abstractly, singularity in Hegel is a synthesis of particularity and universality. And we must assume this point. A truth is a singularity. Absolutely. And it's a very important point to say that a truth is not a generality, but a singularity. For example, a truth is a work of art, a scientific theory, a specific law, and so on. So a truth exists as a singularity. And there is, in fact, a uniqueness of truth. The truth is one truth, always. And you know, it's completely opposed to the vision of truth as the truth of a judgment. Because when we are thinking that the truth is the truth of a judgment, the truth, the universality, is the universality of the proposition. But what is the universality of the proposition? It's always to say that for every x, this property is true. So it's always something like a use of the universal quantifier. So it's always the form of generality. So we find a new contradiction between analytic point of view and dialectical point of view, which is that truth cannot be reduced to the generality of a proposition or judgment. Truth is not something which is true for every element of a set. Truth is a production. Truth is a creation. And there is a unicity of truth, and in fact, truth is always in the form of the singular, or singularity of its existence. In its different forms. It can be the singularity of the collective action, the revolutionary collective action, so the singularity of a political event, or the singularity of a singular work of art, and so on. So there is different form of singularity, but I say, appropriately, and the question is a very good question, that naturally, the truth is singular. And there is no possibility to think of something which is particular and universal without the singularity of that sort of thing. Because it's not the generality of a judgment. It's is the absolute singularity of the existence of something. And this is why there is the possibility of resurrection, that sort of thing. That sort of thing can come back to life in another world, because it's not precisely an abstract generality, but it is a concrete existence of a singularity.
Comments, questions?
Okay.
So the singularity is the marriage of the universal and particular.
Le mariage entre l'universel et le particulier.
Yes, from a strictly logical point of view, and it's the case in Hegel in some sense, we can define the singularity as the synthesis between universality and particularity. But the analysis of this fact is a little more complex, because the process of the singularity is always a process of a creation. So it is not a mechanical synthesis or a mechanical conjunction between universality and particularity. It's much more the birth and the construction with particular materials of something singular, which is of universal value. So, logically speaking, yes, I can say that finally something singular is in the form or result of particularity and universality. But it's not absolutely so abstract, because we can observe that that sort of thing is not directly inside the particularity, but is something like a particular creation of something new. And so that sort of singularity, which is properly universal, is a creation in the particularity, and not an abstract synthesis between the particularity and universality, because before the creation of that sort of singularity, the universality does not exist. If you think that the universality exists, you have to find that there is another world where the universality exists. The universality is the disposition of the singularity itself, with its uniqueness, as a result of a particular creation. And we can give many examples now. It's not at all very complex. For example, a new invention in the field of artistic creation is certainly, at the very beginning, purely particular, with means, concrete situation of painting, music, and so on. And so you create something in the field which is particular, with a certain historical state of the question of the creation and so on. And the result is singular, actually. But the universal value of this singularity is a question, is not a mechanical result. Maybe the thing which is created return to the particularity itself, and nothing more. We cannot say that what is singular is always universal. It's not possible. Because in some sense, particularity is composed of singularities. So first, it is by necessity a new singularity with particular means inside the particular world. After that the universal destiny of this singularity has to be verified, completely verified, and verified in the form of its resurrection in other world. Okay.
How can, in the verification of the event that has free choice, how can that be separated from personal biography?
Say it again just to make sure I understand.
If the verification of the event
La vérification de l'événement.
is free choice,
Donc, libre choix.
how does that deal with personal biography?
Donc, comment est-ce que c'est relié au fait biographique de la personne?
There is no general law concerning this point. For example, we have something like a political event, which is localized always. For example, we have a revolt of students in one country, maybe May 68 in France, for example, something like that. And so the individual position concerning this event is in the form that I was saying when I said there is a declaration. If you engage your personal existence in the fight, in the revolt, in the movement, it's a decision. And clearly it's a decision because we perfectly know that there is some people which take that sort of decision and other people don't at all. So it's a personal decision. And the verification will be only by the successive consequences of that sort of decision. And so there is always a mixture between something purely collective in some sense, the existence of the revolt, and something purely individual, which is the decision to be a part of this collective event or not to be a part of this collective event. And so we have something like a cross, a conjunction between something which is a collective event, an event which is of political nature because it is precisely a collective event, and a conjunction of what I can name atomic choices, which are the choices of individuals. And finally, a collective event is composed of individual choices without determination between the collective and the individual. It is not because the event is collective that individuals are determined to be inside the event. And this is why the event, the consequences, the development of the situation, the consequences of the event, and so on, cannot be inscribed in a pure collective necessity. Certainly there is something like that, but collective necessity, finally, is also composed of what you name biographical decisions. And why we do that? Why an individual is completely engaged in the situation and another is not? There is naturally some determination. He or her is a student, is in some university where the revolt is strong, he has parents who are leftist, and so on. He is a worker, and so on. But there is always a point where we cannot inscribe the choice purely that sort of determination, because we can always find somebody which has the same determination, which is not in the revolt. So there is a part of determination, a big part sometimes of determination, but there is always a point, maybe a very small point, which is not reducible to the determination. And this part can be named freedom after all. There is something free in atomic decision constitutive of being event. And so we can examine collective event by two completely different perspectives or points of view. From the massive determination, which are also correct, the situation, the rapport of places, the conjunction between students and workers, and so on and so on. That is true. But we must also describe all that from the point of view of an atomic decision of somebody which is inside all that. And it's always something like the crossing of the two, which constitutes finally the possibility of a new truth. And I name that the incorporation in the logic of the world, the process of incorporation of individuals in the body of the truth. But the incorporation is not prescribed by the process of the truth. It's only a possibility. You have the new possibility. That's why if there is no revolt at all, the possibility to be inscribed in the revolt does not exist. But in the reverse, it is not because there is a collective event, a revolt, a localized something, that there is a complete determination to be inside the collective revolt. And so, really, it's like a quantum mechanics after all. There is a result, a collective result, with at a macroscopic level is like a determination, but if you see the thing inside the atomic decision, you find something which is not determinate.
What is the distinction between a decision and a judgment?
Quelle est la distinction entre un jugement et une décision?
A decision can be without judgment at all. A decision is only the fact, yeah, you personally decide to be engaged in a process, and it's not reducible to the judgment. Naturally, probably, if you be engaged in the process, you are saying that the process is a good process, you have reason, and so on. But after all that is the justification. The act of decision, the decision is an act, and not a judgment, precisely. And the judgment can be justification of the act, can be among the reasons of the act, but finally, to decide something is to do something. And not only to say that the thing and that sort of art is good. And in fact, in the political situation or the existential situation in general, we can experiment the clear distinction between a positive judgment concerning a process and effective participation in the process. It's not the same. And it is why there is always the possibility to be with the movement, but not inside the movement. And it is the position of the judgment. And it is my contradiction with Hannah Arendt, for example. Because for Hannah Arendt, the political is the place of judgment. But I think it's not completely the case. We have the question not only of the political judgment, but of the political action. And we know perfectly by experience that it's not the same thing. There is no determination, pure determination, from the judgment to the action. Or the central part of political activity is action, collective action. And naturally, we are very glad of good judgment concerning your action. It's not a good judgment is not. And we perfectly know that in the concrete politics today, we can have judgments concerning the government, for example, or certain decisions of the government, but without any change of the situation. Because the change of the situation is an active change, and not a pure question of opinion. For example, in my country, we perfectly know that today the opinion is a big opinion against the government of Sarkozy. Sarkozy is continue to do the job. Absolutely. And there is something in the pure opinion which is also important say, without organization, mobilization, action, and so on. And it is a proof that the political field is not reducible to the question of opinions, but to the question of existence of a real process of construction of a new political truth. It's a question of Laura Long.
If knowledge can be dialectical, how, where can or does it rupture?
A dialectical vision of knowledge is a vision which includes the existence of ruptures inside the development of knowledge itself. So it's only the analytical vision of knowledge we assume the continuity of the development of knowledge. In the dialectical vision of knowledge itself, we have the recognition, the affirmation of the existence of rupture. And in fact, we can see that, for example, in the history of sciences. The history of sciences, we have absolute rupture on some points. It's not only in political process, in artistic process, but in scientific process too, we have very important rupture. For example, the passage to the conception of time in the Newtonian physics to the conception of time in the physics of Einstein and relativist physics. It's really a revolution. It's not a revolution outside the knowledge. It's a revolution inside the development of knowledge itself. It's a revolution in physics. And so we must recognize in a dialectical vision that there exists a rupture in the development of knowledge and not pure cumulation, pure continuity. There is really discontinuity, objective discontinuity in the development of knowledge, and so an immanent negation, because in some sense, the physics of Einstein is the negation of the Newtonian physics, but in another sense, it's a development and a continuation of the physics itself. There is a level where Newtonian physics is true, and there is another level or cosmic, if you want, where only relativity is true. So it's really dialectical in the sense that the passage to from Newtonian physics to Einsteinian physics is a passage which is of dialectical nature, synthesis of negation and construction. So negativity is also inside scientific development. And this is why we cannot stay in the vision of science in purely analytical point of view.
Speak up to make sure.
The dialectical movement of knowledge has also a practical side.
Un côté pratique du savoir dialectique. Is that a question or a comment?
Okay, yes. Isn't this different from the relationship physics has to knowledge, in which you observe, but you cannot interrupt the object you are observing? You are just testing a hypothesis.
So you're saying, is there a difference between
Dialectical knowledge in
physics?
physics and dialectical knowledge in social
Okay,
issues?
thank you. Il demande s'il y a une différence entre
Oui.
le savoir dialectique.
I think there is a difference because the two determinations are not the same, and also because social contradiction have a dimension which is a subjective one. So we have to take into account the negativity of consciousness, the negativity of practical action, and so on. And so probably the forms of negativity are not the same. Maybe there is in the social contradictions something which is a destructive part. There is something, a conflict between enemies, between class struggles and so on, and also wars, or something like that. So there is a place for violence and destruction. And in the development of science, there is negation, there is revolution, there is brutal transformation, but it's not properly violence and destruction, because precisely it's not in concrete reference to the notion of subjectivity. Or the notion of subjectivity is also the question of relationship to others, and maybe sometimes relationship to enemies. And so we have a form of contradiction. We can be what is named antagonistic contradiction. Maybe finally, the question of difference between dialectics and social question and dialectics is a scientific question, is the fact that in social question, contradiction can be an antagonistic contradiction. So a contradiction without synthesis. Rebecca Klobuchar, 3 questions, but which are finally the same field. So
Really two.
you can read the 3 questions.
Ruptures have been referred to as violent ruptures. Are there non-violent ruptures? Definition of violence? Difference between rupture and interruption?
We are in some sense in the same field that the precedent question. Violent rupture was a metaphor. It was not the idea of violence in the precise sense of violence concerning bodies, concerning the question of death or life, and so on. When I have said that rupture was violent rupture, only in the sense that rupture is really a rupture. It's a metaphor. To say that a rupture is really surprising transformation. Something which is not is the peaceful continuation of subjectivity. In this sense, the passage from the physics of Newton to the physics of Einstein is a violent passage. And in fact, there exist resistances, oppositions, conflict, and so on. It's not a peaceful passage with a global consensus concerning this passage. Something different. And it was this signification, metaphorical signification of the violent. If we take violent in the sense of antagonistic contradiction, with possibility of destruction, war, death, and so on, my answer is there exists non-violent rupture. In some sense, the rupture between two forms of physics and so on is non-violent. If violence is not the metaphorical designation of a true change with opposition, resistance, and so on, but if violence is really the will to destroy somebody or something, to destroy completely, to be victorious, and so on. So, for the first question, my answer is conduct immediately to the definition, to the second question, definition of violence. So the second question is the key for the first. Violence it's not a simple notion, because violence has a weak signification and a strong signification. The weak signification of violence is precisely that something happens which is like a shock, which is surprising, which is not in the continuity, the quiet continuation of life, existence, collective existence, and so on. Something happens, but in a radical sense, something happens really, something which is not reducible to the state of affairs. And in its weak sense, in metaphorical sense, we can say that some experience has been a violent experience. It's not in the sense that there is death, body with suffering and so on. In the sense where this violent experience is an experience of the newness, something like that, pure newness. So an amorous encounter can be something violent. And for example, the effect, the sudden effect of the very impressive work of art, the effect of a very extraordinary film, movie, can be something violent. If we define violence by a big trouble of the subjectivity, big emotion. But in its strong sense, violence is really in relationship to antagonistic contradiction. That is a situation where it's impossible to find a way without the destruction of one of the two terms of the contradiction. Where, for example, if you are on a real battlefield, you have a defeat or victory is a radical question, and we must destroy the force of the enemy. And so, and violence violence is something like, finally, in this sense, violence is under something like a law of death, the question of death. And it is why we name generally violence something like that. Act where the question of death is present, or the question of suffering is present. And so, violence in our world and in the strong sense is very often the question of the body of human beings. It's a corporal question. Why torture, death, suffering, and also moral suffering. For example, there was in law a rupture, a dramatic rupture, can be very violent. And as you know, there is amorous murder. This law has many truths, it's also dangerous. And because it is something violent. And there is a part of violence in every truth. Not in the sense of the death of the body, but the new truth is always something which in some sense is violent beginning, violence, newness, which is surprising, which is not really in the situation, which is universal value, which is beyond our laws, our situation, and so on. But strictly speaking, strictly speaking, violence must be defined in its strong sense by the effect of an antagonistic contradiction between two persons, or between two people, or between two classes. And now, difference between rupture and concerning violence, I think that the question is probably what is the rule concerning violence? Violence in the context of a truth. Is there a moral rule, something like that? And the question of non-violence, which is an important question today, is there a possibility of revolutionary politics in the context of non-violence? It's a very difficult question because what is the situation where you are non-violent but the enemy is violent? It's always a problem. And I think I cannot develop this point because it's a very complex one, but I think that we cannot completely eliminate the possibility of a defensive violence. Aggressive violence is generally a bad thing, but defensive violence can be a little bit completely suppressed. For me, there is a real difficulty. Because precisely you can have a situation where the very essence of the enemy is to be violent. And the clearest example is fascism. Fascism assumes absolutely that violence is right. And the will to destroy all enemies is a characteristic of that sort of politics. Suppose you construct something which is popular, peaceful, and so on, and you are in front of fascism, the will of which is to destroy absolutely all that, to kill everybody, and so on. Non-violence is very difficult, concretely. And so, yes, and so the dialectic between non-violence and violence is a dialectic complex. And I think that today we don't completely have the measure of the problem. It's a problem of today. You know the experience of non-violence in India, for example. But at the end, it has been extraordinary violence between Muslims and Indians. So the question is really an open question. Yes?
Continuing somewhat with this discussion that we're having, it seems that this idea of rupture in the in light of May '68 is no longer perhaps possible in our advanced capitalist society, that all chances for rupture are automatically absorbed or mediated, and not that chance for rupture is removed. And I'm thinking of September 11th in the United States, the Bandur riots of 2005, the anti-war protests, or even the Tarnac 9, that it's absorbed and mediated, and the chance for rupture never occurs. The process which led to May '68, all of the thoughts, the actions, the people coming together that led to it, never has a chance to occur. It seems in our society now.
Il y a une comparaison entre 1968 et aujourd'hui, et que ce qui était possible en 1968, les ruptures, la révolution, est aujourd'hui avalé un petit peu par le système. Et aujourd'hui, c'est plus possible.
I understand the question, but finally, you know, when I was in France in 1967, the situation was completely quiet. The system was excellent. There is no revolt at all. De Gaulle was celebrated by everybody. So the interruption, the rupture of May '68 was certainly impossible. And an event, a true event, is always the apparition of something which is impossible, which was impossible. It's a characteristic of an event. An event is a clear possibility inside the situation. It is not an event. It's only a possibility of the situation, a rational possibility, and there is certainly some politicians which are saying that this song is possible. An event is precisely the realization of possibility of something which was impossible, and the possibilization of impossibility. That is a possible definition to an event. And really, France in 1966, 1968 was a quiet country, absolutely. With intellectual activity, very dense intellectual activity, okay. But at the side of the large masses of students or workers and so on, the situation was a stable situation. And nobody was speaking of revolution in France. Abstractly, yes, abstract revolution, but as a fact, it was absolutely not a possibility. And so we return with your question to the definition of the real by Lacan. The definition of the real is the impossible. The real of the event is its impossibility. It's impossibility from the point of view of the situation, from the point of view of being and existence. And that is a rupture. A rupture is always that something that everybody thinks impossible happens. That is and so we can difference between rupture and interruption. It's all it's the same context. If an interruption is only the end of a part of the situation, a part of the process, maybe it's not a rupture. For example, the interruption of the life of somebody, the death of somebody is an interruption, but it's not by necessity a rupture. So, a rupture is an interruption of repetition, but it's not the reverse, it's not true. Some interruptions are not rupture. So, the question of a rupture is always the question of the apparition of something new, and not only the end of something. We can return to our image, arithmetical image. Succession. Repetition. Creation of some differences by repetition, and rupture. You cannot define the rupture only by the fact that the interruption, that the repetition is interrupted. We must say also that there is something new which is on the other side of the rupture. So, a rupture, full rupture, finally an event, is not only negation, that is the interruption of repetition, but also an affirmation. Something new is here. It is why there is a decision to say that there is something new. It has been a discussion concerning May 68. Many people have said that 68 was not at all the beginning of something, but only the end of something. The last revolution, the last... it was a discussion at the moment. And if May 68 is a rupture, it's the opening of a new possibility, and not only the interruption of the old possibility. Okay. The other question tomorrow. Okay.